The technology for these things already exists. That's not where the gap is. The gap to close is the social solutions. How do we build the relationships? How do we create the social license? How do we build the trust that will empower these types of technical solutions to deliver value? The grid was a lovely piece of technology that enabled the electricity to get from where it was produced to where it was consumed. But in the energy transition, that has completely changed. So we've got people who are both consumers and producers, but our thinking about the grid as an asset has not changed.
Welcome to Energypreneurs, the podcast where solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles come together. I'm your host, Sohail Hasni. When we combine these technologies, something powerful happens. On this show, I speak with founders, engineers, and investors who are building this fantastic new energy system. Thank you for joining. Good morning, Robert. I like
Good
your
morning,
background.
Sohail. Thank you. Yes. I wish it was real.
Melbourne.
But yes, no, I'm in Melbourne, so it's not real, but it's a fun background.
Okay, I'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself before we start.
Well, I'm probably not like most of your guests because I'm not an energy expert and I don't have great expertise in the field. What I do have is a lot of passion, and I have experts who are supporting me. So really interested in how we can find ways to make the energy transition more people-centered. The technology for these things already exists. That's not where the gap is. The gap to close is the social solutions. How do we build the relationships? How do we create the social license? How do we build the trust that will empower these types of technical solutions to deliver value? If it's done in a way where somebody feels, oh, this is a commercial operator who's purely trying to make money out of me, they won't be interested, or they'll be very wary. And for me, thinking about our grid and how it's evolved and changed, I think it's interesting to think of the grid in terms of relationships. So when the electricity markets evolved, we had a grid that was, I suppose, relatively static, and the roles were clear. So we had people who made electricity and we had people who consumed electricity, and the grid was a lovely piece of technology that enabled the electricity to get from one place to where it was produced to another where it was consumed. But in the energy transition, that has completely changed. So we've got people who are both consumers and producers, but our thinking about the grid as an asset has not changed. So we still think about it as, I guess, an asset that is owned by, in current situation, private corporates, but it's no longer really a private asset in the sense that if I'm exporting, if I have a battery and solar and I'm exporting, then what I do matters and impacts my neighbours. So the grid, and that can have either a positive or a negative impact, depending if I'm doing things that are sensible and responsible or not, particularly if we have households doing that at scale. And I suppose a really good illustration is AGL actually found this out the hard way when they were conducting research in South Australia on the benefits of hooking up hot water services to the grid and making them turn on during the middle of the day to become a solar soaker. When they first set up this experiment, they made the mistake of turning them all on at the same time. And of course, that caused a lot of problems with the grid. And they quickly learned, oh, well, no, we shouldn't have done that. We actually need to bring these on in a staggered way so that we don't overload the circuits. But that's the risk that we are moving into as we move forward, is that particularly with the idea of a 3 for free being introduced, the solar soaker tariff, if everybody turns on all their kit at 11 a.m. precisely, that's going to have implications for the grid, particularly if they're all turning on, charging their batteries and charging their EVs. That could be interesting. So to think of the grid as a piece of equipment in that classic sense is doesn't seem to make sense anymore. So we've got something that has elements of what traditionally was called a commons. So a commons meant a shared asset that different people participated in and stewarded or looked after together in order to protect that asset and to create value for everybody. But in our use of the grid, that creates some really interesting problems. If the grid now has the characteristics of a commons, where how I use it and how you use it interacts with one another, where is the relationship between different users and how is that held in a way that makes sense? Now, to take that back to, I guess, much more, that's a bit at the philosophical high level, but to bring that down to earth, we have a situation where in Victoria, we have 78% of people on the wrong tariff. So the energy market is complex, it's becoming increasingly complex, and consumers, households are really struggling to deal with that and make sense of it. We have many opportunities that people can engage in if they're, well, that some people can engage in and others not. So, for example, with the battery program that the federal government has rolled out in Australia, which has been a very successful program, one of the big barriers is it really is only for people who are homeowners. So if one lives in an apartment like me, it's much more difficult to take advantage of that program because I can't have solar. Or if someone is a renter or from a vulnerable household, how do they benefit from that? So that creates equity problems in the transition. So I think we need ways of thinking about how we interact with one another that can bring us forward in ways that bring everybody along, but also that create real and meaningful opportunities for people to participate in the energy transition. So at the moment, some households are jumping in, others are held back by the complexity of the choices. Is an EV the right choice for me? I suppose there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of market pressures. So how do households respond to that? And often it's by making the decision to do nothing and wait till signals become clearer. So in the work that I'm and my team are launching Collective Power Boroondara is we're looking to cut through some of those barriers. So we're starting with something super simple, which is helping people get on the right tariff. I
It's
think that's
almost like a bank cooperative, no? Yeah, right?
It is similar to that. So our mission is to empower our members and to do so in a way that brings everyone along. So if we can help people get on the right deal and create some value and build some trust, then we can ask people a few more questions. Tell us about your lifestyle. Are you home during the day or are you away during the day? Tell us a bit about your envelope of your home. Is it brick? Is it timber? Is it new? Is it old? Tell us about your appliances. And what that can do once we have that plus people's bills is we can build an energy profile of a household and then provide tailored, personalized information about what will their best strategies for optimizing their energy use be, whether that might be an EV. So we're hoping to move from a very simple offering of helping people get on the right tariff to being able to provide a bit of energy guidance and then at scale to be able to negotiate group deals is at the scale of several thousand households. So in Boroondara, there are, I think, 78,000 households. So that's in our local government area as Boroondara. And so if we were able to get 5% penetration, we're looking at over 3,000 households. So that becomes something that creates a bit of a parcel that can be packaged.
Yeah, then you can be almost can become a retailer where, I mean, if you grow large enough, right? I mean, only thing is you said we are neither an NGO nor a business. So you can have that business model, So with the right risk envelope attached to it, so you can be a pseudo retailer. All you're doing is aggregating the demands and supplying with a better knowledge. And then if you have a platform, which I'm sure you have, so you don't need to be geographically tied to the area that you are in, right? So you are gradually become a retailer then, no? Is that a part
Well,
of the plan?
not immediately, and we're not as tied to the area. So our structure is that we are locally focused, and there's a few reasons for that. If it means that, of course, the grid, in fact, is local, and how the grid works is local. Seeing it being able to map members against the local grid actually is really powerful.
It's almost become a
Yes,
franchise. You can go all over the
correct.
country, right?
That's exactly right. So what we're doing is in Boroondara, we're building a pilot of a model that is completely transferable, and that's a part of our business plan, is to create the templates and the tech stack that is completely transferable. So if we could go to Whitehorse or Doncaster or Yarra and create the same sort of structure. And this is a model I've seen actually for corporate users rather than household users in the US, where you get a number of those sorts of entities up, and you then move some of the functions that benefit from economies of scale to a member back office where you can then do buying for a number of local entities, but you still have that very hyper-local. You can maintain hyper-local delivery of other services, but for those things that benefit from economies of scale, you can aggregate those at the back end.
I think that's where the community thing really comes in. You can say, okay, it's Robert, okay, who lives next door, and he's in that, that's where my kids go to school, right?
Correct. And for ways to, I think, a hunger for community involvement. And the co-op, I think, offers something of that opportunity for people to be involved in a way that does good things for your community. So in the other half of that handshake, if you will, is who in particular do we want to center in our community who may need additional support? And I think there's some amazing opportunities to think through how we bring along more vulnerable households and help them to benefit from the energy transition. Now, there's quite a number of ways that can be done. If they're people who are home during the day, what we can do is set people up for success in using all that free solar that is going to be available in the middle of the day. Now, there's a number of strategies, and I won't go into the technicals of all that. I'm sure there's many people in your audience who know more about that than I do. But the barrier is not the technology. That we have most of the technical solutions for this. The barrier is the relationships. So how do we connect people to the right people who can help them? How do we create also the monetary help? So if you've got excess solar and you're exporting that responsibly, can you donate your excess solar to your neighbor who's not well off? And the answer is technically yes. We have the accounting software that can do that sort of work. In fact, one of your previous guests I noted is one of the pioneers in that area, Grant, and I've forgotten his surname now, but he is a pioneer in that area. And there's Deakin University is currently running a trial of what they call VENs, virtual energy networks. Now, those ideas are good ideas, and they make much more sense if you can make them place-based. Because if the people who are in a virtual energy network are behind the same substation, then the ability to share, and particularly if they're doing it so in a responsible manner that helps balance the grid, the ability to share energy makes sense, and it creates value for all of the users of the grid and for the asset owner. The other opportunity with community ownership of assets is whether they're owned by the co-op as an entity or whether the co-op creates vehicles that enable people to invest. One of the things we have looked at doing is, there's obviously the simplest method is solar rooftop PPA. So in Boroondara, there's quite a few, for example, aged care facilities. If they don't, they're great sites for solar because they've got high use 24/7, and they have typically big roofs. Could the community invest in a community-owned rooftop solar PPA? Yes, absolutely. But the next extension beyond that is to move to invite people to do that in a way that promotes equity. So we've had this concept, panels for purpose. So instead of you buying a panel for yourself, you donate a panel to a vulnerable household, and the income from that panel is credited against their energy bill. Technically, it's not a difficult thing to do.
It's just accounting all of those is difficult, but if you have a system behind it, so that's easy. Yeah.
Well, there's a company in Sydney, Solar Cloud, who are doing that sort of thing already, not on a charity basis, but if you're someone like me who lives in an apartment and can't have solar on your own roof, I can buy panels on somebody else's roof and have the income from those panels credited against my electricity bill. Well, that's one thing. That's further, it's on our roadmap, but a little further down because we need to develop further and scale, but it's absolutely possible. And as I said, the technology is all in place. It's already up, already working. And when I spoke to the CEO of Solar Cloud, he said, yes. He said, yes, there's other people already using us as middleware. We provide the technology and the legals to facilitate organizations to make deals about locally owned solar PPAs.
Interesting. So taking a step back, we mentioned briefly about the free electricity the government is proposing.
Yes.
I mean, I plan to do a debate on this with a few of the experts, the few of the people with the different views. I had someone with a very strong views. No, this doesn't work. So what's your viewpoint of this? I've got two extremes already.
Yes. Well, I'll preface this by saying that I'm not an expert, but
No, you're a consumer. That's important because the technology is there and everybody understands the basics, right? So the basic is very important.
Yeah. So the basics, at the moment, we have solar being wasted in the middle of the day. It's being spilled because there's more solar than there is, more energy than there is demand on many days. So if we've got effectively stuff being wasted, giving it away to somebody who can use it makes a lot of sense. So to me, that's the very simple underlying principle. And this is going to get worse as more people install solar. And even though batteries will help solve it a bit, because their batteries will soak up more of that extra power in the middle of the day, that doesn't necessarily benefit those who can't have solar. So if we can create mechanisms that enable those who can't have solar or can't have batteries and can't have solar to benefit from that excess during the middle of the day, to me, that's a sensible thing to do. I know there's people make arguments that it can be used and abused by people who have batteries as well. So my friend Russell charges his battery in his EV. He's already on a plan that has 3 hours free in the middle of the day, and he makes very, very good use of it. But however, I think, and some people are arguing, well, it'll benefit wealthy households too much, so we should cap it. I don't think that's actually the full picture, because those households who have a big battery and charge it up in the middle of the day are going to optimize that asset by exporting in the evening. And what that will tend to do is put downward pressure on prices later in the day as well.
And then everybody benefits.
Everybody benefits. So I'm a little bit suspicious of the argument that, oh, there's households who can afford the assets will get too much benefit. I don't think that's really true. I think they will, in order to make best use of their asset, they'll be exporting in the evening and suppress the evening peaks. And there are ways of setting people up for success. I mean, the most obvious one is water heating, which is something that every household needs. If you've got water heating, you can put that on a timer and run that during the free window. And that is actually a very effective way of being a solar soaker. And then depending on people's homes, and I know this doesn't always work, but you can preheat or pre-cool your home.
Slab heating, those who have.
Yeah, for those who have that sort of thing. But if your home is reasonably insulated, you can run your cooler on a hot day and then you get home in the evening it still will be reasonably cool. So you can take a lot of the pressure off the evening by using your house as a heat battery. But that is, of course, dependent on people having living in a decent home in terms of its energy efficiency, which in Melbourne, sadly, is very often not the case. But as we move forward, that will become an increasing benefit. So there are other ways people can benefit from that free energy in the middle of the day, even if they're not at home.
Am I doing it right?
Correct. And then also to open up so many more opportunities. So with batteries, the value you can get out of a battery is greatly enhanced by the battery understanding what tariff you're on. If you're operating your battery in a way that doesn't have the basic smarts built in, then you're losing a lot of value. So whether that's being part of a VPP or perhaps a more loose arrangement where people can coordinate the use of those assets in a way that gets best value and can be done in a way that is, particularly for those people who are non-technical, which is a bit like me. I'm not a particularly techie person. One of my team, and I'll call out his name because he's done lots of talks in this space, Russell Williams, a brilliant man. He is very techie. His energy bill across all categories in June of last year was $5.50 because he has batteries, solar, and an EV, and has integrated Home Assistant, which is an app that enables people to control all the appliances in their home in order to completely optimize his home. And he's a retired Telstra engineer. So for him, that's a fantastic challenge. For the person in the street, that's not doable because it requires a high level of technical knowledge and time. But what we are hoping to do is to reproduce a much more simple version of that people can either do or have done for them by the cooperative, so they can actually make much smarter use of their energy resources, cut their bills, but also make the grid more resilient. So there's some amazing opportunities and some very talented people out there who can bring tremendous value. And I think you're absolutely right about working with LGAs. There is so many opportunities to think about how an organisation like a cooperative, which is really a civil society organisation, can partner with local government to ask really searching questions. So there was a really interesting study done on the City of Sydney where researchers said, if we really optimised what percentage of the City of Sydney's energy needs could we actually generate within the City of Sydney? And the answer they came up with was 75%. Well, I think that's true, but I think I'm also cautious because it needs the right support for households to succeed. And I guess the importance of the cooperative work is unless there is that trusted partner for households, the uptake of this is going to be very patchy. So for example, you talked before about VPPs, but VPP uptake in Australia is very low because people don't trust the plans. And there's a good reason for that. If you go look under the hood on some of the plans, you can see, okay, some of them aren't great value. Or they provide the 80-20 rule, 80% of the value is going to the retailer and 20 back to the household. So some of them don't represent good value. So having that trusted partner who can say, this is the good value plan you want to get on this one, or to negotiate at scale. If you're negotiating for 3,000 batteries, then it's a different kettle of fish to a single household. So it takes away, from a technical perspective, the co-op is addressing the information asymmetries in the market. You've got a very complex market, which the retailers have very expert people that they employ to manage that very complex. But for households don't have the expertise or the resources. So who is standing shoulder to shoulder with household? And I think with the best will in the world, regulators can't do that. That regulators can improve the environment, but there's limitations. So households need, and depending on the needs of individual households, they just need more support. So cooperative that's a not-for-profit and therefore doesn't have a conflict of interest can provide a tailored level of support to individual households that can't be provided in any other way.
Yes, I mean, knowing a customer matters because I had a situation as a young engineer in State Electricity Commission, which I'll never forget. I was some 20 odd years old, late 20s. We doubled the supply charge from whatever, $22 to double because all the people have holiday homes. So we thought, okay, we'll catch them. But we changed the tariff so that it's a neutral sort of on the average point. And this lady who wrote to the Premier's office eventually came to us, and I was working in the tariff at that time. And she said, I used to watch Wheel of Fortune and Sale of Century. You remember those in the TV. And because of you guys, now I have to cut down to one. I'm a widower. I live in a little thing. My electricity bill is $10 or $12 a month. I'm talking what, late 80s. And I went through her bill and I cried. I said, oh my God. She didn't show up on my SAS model on the mainframe that I was running, right? So I called her and I said, listen, I promise we'll fight, that we'll change this so that, and then I think that was one of the reasons why we came up with this, one of the concession arrangement that if you are a concession card holder, your supply charge will be never more than your demand or whatever the solution. But I still remember that voice when I talked to her, that she's a customer I did not see. I had access to all of Victoria's customer on the SAS mainframe, but she was not the average customer. She was like we used to think, oh, people with sort of big swimming pool consuming and it's a holiday home, they pay little supply charge, let's increase them. So sometimes it's very important that when you say consumer, which consumer, there are all different kinds.
Absolutely. And that's part of the benefit of the local model that we want to implement. It means that we can actually be much closer to people. And that's why it is that hybrid model, hyper-local delivery, where we can be close to people and really understand people's challenges. But as we evolve to move to a model where we can scale some of the things that make sense to aggregate at the back end, but still do so in a way that enables local delivery people to be incredible. And I guess I'm a little bit skeptical about technical solutions that aren't supported by the right social solutions, because particularly if I go back to that model of the grid as fundamentally becoming more relational, because what we do impacts one another. If that's our reality, and I think we've agreed it is, then we need a social model that matches our technical model. And the current market model doesn't succeed there. I think, and I'm not being too cheeky, but to say that the market approach has really failed. In the recent energy market report, I think it was the AEMC, they used the word competition over 300 times. And well, we've had competition for 25 years. And is this the triumph of hope over experience? And I'm not saying that we should completely get rid of competition, because that's completely impractical, and I understand that. But competition is not the only solution. We need other solutions as well, including collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, competition is okay, but competing on what? That's the issue. It's not just the system marginal price tomorrow. It's sort of what is better for the grid.
Yeah. And what's better for, at the end of the day, the grid is there to serve the community. And in that sense, particularly as the grid's evolving, it is becoming more and more a shared asset. So how are we working together to manage that shared asset in a way that everyone benefits? And competition is not going to help us get there. It ends up having people in silos.
Yeah.
It'll help us in some ways. Competition has a role to play, but it can't play an exclusive role, because the danger is that competition will really just create competition to make the most money, not to produce the best outcome.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the regulators are there. Regulator is a proxy for competition where the competition cannot be, but also to make sure competition rules and all. But regulators also have limited ability.
Yeah, because I mean, the regulator, I've seen this, the word regulation game, the expression, the regulation game, where it's almost like the evolutionary battle of the hunter and the hunted. So the regulators make the rules, and the competitors get good at gaming the system. So the regulators go, "Oh, that's no good." So they change the rules, and then the competitors work out how they can game the new rules, and so you have this ever onward cycle.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you want to share?
Yeah, we've talked about it. We've talked a lot. Really, if people want to contact me, very
Yes.
happy for you to include my details in the notes at the podcast. Also, if people would like to read that really good article by Dr. Ron Ben David, I can put a link to that. I can send you a link to that as well, so you can include that. He actually talks about, amongst his solutions, about he raises the idea of an internal market for consumers as a theoretical construct, of which the co-op is kind of a real life approximation of his theory. So I'm very happy to include that, to send that through so people can access that as well. It's a very, very interesting article.
Okay, that's good. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's been an absolute privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Energypreneurs. Let's work together electrifying everything. This podcast is available in audio form on your favorite platforms and in video on YouTube. See you on next episode. Please feel free to subscribe to our channel, and we always appreciate your comments.